Food prices are up 30% around the world this year, but the world is facing the prospect of a dramatic shortfall in food production as rising energy prices cascade through global agriculture. CEOs of agricultural conglomerates worldwide are warning that crop yields will be down this next year for a host of reasons. The subsequent reduction in crop yields will come to you in the form of less food, higher prices, and fewer raw materials for agricultural byproducts. When the average consumer realizes the shortages are real, panic buying and hoarding could exacerbate the problem. In this video, we're going to take a look at significant threats all converging to create a food crisis this next year. And we'll look at practical solutions you can implement now to keep from getting swept up in the crisis. The prospects for next year, they're beginning to look a bit gloomy unless something changes. The dark clouds are clearly on the horizon and heading our direction, but you do still have time to prepare. Again, something we'll cover at the end of this video. So let's take a look. Please consider subscribing to our newsletter by clicking on the link in the description and comment section below. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe and click the like button to help the channel grow. Fertilizer. Because of the tripling of the cost of natural gas, synthetic fertilizer plants in Europe have massively scaled back production. China is cutting exports to direct its fertilizer production to its own growing needs. Canada's fertilizer mining operations are at half production. Without these synthetic fertilizer, global crop yields will be dramatically decreased. Small farm operations may find themselves priced out of the market altogether. Some farmers will opt not to grow, and those that do see their profit margins already razor thin, shrinking even further. The big three synthetic fertilizers that led to what is called the Great Revolution and set the stage for our current population levels are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The old method of fertilization often involved manure, runoff, and waste from freshwater fish operations, and the addition of rock or bone meal to the land. Plants like clover pull nitrogen from the air and would serve as a grazing crop, so it was a common practice to simply not grow, leave the field in a fallow state for a year to allow the nutrients in the soil to be replenished. With the Green Revolution, however, fertilizers permit the fields to be continually harvested without this fallow period. Potassium, phosphorus, potassium sulfate, nitrogen, potash, and other synthetic fertilizers have ushered in this green revolution that has allowed a global population explosion. Plants require 13 nutrients to grow. Micronutrients like copper, iron, and magnesium are usually found in sufficient amounts in the soil. Secondary nutrients like calcium, magnesium, and zinc are also often found in soil and do not always require supplementation. Any gardener can tell you the quality improvement of peppers and tomatoes and many other vegetables when just a little calcium is added to the soil. Successive harvests can deplete farming operations of these vital nutrients and warrant soil supplementation. Almost always, the three primary macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, are used in significant amounts by growing plants, so they must be replaced periodically to sustain productivity. And that's where synthetic fertilizers come into play. They're either manufactured or mined, as in potash, a potassium-rich salt. Without them, yields are far lower and food production decreases significantly. The effects of just the prospect of lower yields because of the fertilizer shortage are already revealing themselves. Food prices in the United States have been rising at a staggering rate across the board this year. An expensive fertilizer could push the cost of production almost 20% higher. Crop future prices are skyrocketing. Bacon and pork ribs cost nearly 20% more than a year ago, and eggs are 13% higher. Corn has been up 10% since the middle of last month, and wheat is at its highest level in nearly a decade. With food inflation already at record highs, you can expect prices to increase even further from here substantially. One recent study found a doubling of fertilizer prices leads to an almost 44% increase in food prices, but fertilizer prices have tripled already and may quadruple in the coming months. This would lead to a 66 to 88% in food prices across all categories. That shopping cart of $100 of groceries today might cost you $188 for the same amount by the middle of next year. You most directly witness these price increases at the grocery store, but it's essential to realize how low yields from a lack of synthetic fertilizer have a systematic effect. From animal feed to plastics, what we grow is more than just what we shop for at the grocery store and eat at home. Weather. Just our bodies use various nutrients to facilitate different functions. Nitrogen promotes leaf growth. Phosphorus fosters the development of roots, flowers, seeds, and fruit. Potassium promotes strong stem growth, movement of water in plants, and phosphorus also encourages flowering and fruiting. A lack of nutrients for plants in the form of synthetic fertilizer deprives them of what they need to resist high heat, other extreme weather conditions, even insect infestation. Specifically, potassium of the kind derived from potash protects plants from extreme temperatures. It helps plants fight stress and disease and deter pests such as weeds and insects. Potassium stops wilting, strengthens roots and stems, and assists in transferring food. So ensuring crops have ample potassium available in the soil is essential to a crop's survival in high heat situations, or to fight off insect explosions brought about by excessive periods of moisture. Potash is mined from deposits around the world. Many of these mining operations were slowed or shut down this last year due to COVID-19 outbreaks. This has resulted in the supply of this fertilizer going down and prices going up. While not a new thing, we see a significant increase in crop failures, and the numbers are increasing every year. The famous Walla Walla sweet onion is a perfect example I've explained before. Several successive days of uncharacteristic 100-degree days wiped out 98% of the crop this year. This year, the derecho storm impacted 57% of Iowa's crops. Grain bins were torn to pieces, resulting in over 100 million bushels of storage lost. Due to drought across America's midsection, the oats harvest is smaller than it has ever been. The drought was so severe that lower yields also impacted wheat, corn, and soybeans among the big grains. California's tomato crop this year also suffered. Around the world, floods in Vietnam and Sudan, locusts in Africa, dust storms in India, megafires in Australia. The recent weather has dramatically reduced harvest. In Europe, the severity of crop losses driven by heat waves and drought has tripled in the last 50 years, according to the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. At no other point in history has agriculture been faced with such an array of familiar and unfamiliar risk, interacting in a hyper-connected world and precipitously changing landscape. The growing frequency and intensity of disasters, along with the systematic nature of risk, are jeopardizing our entire food system. It's a growing frequency that should be cause for alarm. We can expect more crop failures from the weather, and there'll be more significant crop failures because of the lack of fertilizer the plants need to harden themselves off to wind, water, sun, and insects. Some of the losses for this last year are beginning to trickle down to consumers and are a catalyst to inflation, but expect even higher costs once the actual negative numbers are processed with rising consumer demand and the math is revealed. Farmers, manufacturers, consumers. Faced with the prospect of 300% or higher costs for synthetic fertilizers, either manufactured or mined in a previous year's reduced harvest, the small farmer has to wonder if it's even worth it this next year. Corporate and leased farms may try to cut their losses too. Harvest could be further reduced simply because a choice is not made to plant or to plant less, leaving some fields fallow, planting cover crops like clover, vetch, ryegrass, buckwheat, or rapeseed, and letting the grazing animals at it replenish the soil. In contrast, other fields are tasked with a smaller but more tended crop, which will result in steady but reduced production. These green manures were used often before the Green Revolution and the rise of the mega farm. While still used today, synthetic fertilizer has become a more common method. Switching gears for many will not come without costs and necessary lower harvests. Price manipulation to drive up costs, even beyond inflation increases, isn't unheard of as farmers seek to make up the lost profits of this year and the year before. Price manipulation also always drives up price and scarcity, leading to panic buying and hoarding activities. Delaying what harvest you have or holding it as long as you can in silos can artificially create shortages and drive up demand. It isn't a new concept. Amidst the Great Depression, even when people were hungry, milk prices halved, and a group of Wisconsin farmers formed a blockade and dumped milk to drive up the price. Amidst the pandemic and lockdown, with demand for small school milks and 95-pound boxes of cheese bottoming out, several farmers found such low prices being offered for the bulk milk that they considered dumping it into their manure pits. In Italy, after a fall's harvest that was 50% lower than just 4 years ago, farmers held their harvest back from olive oil presses to drive up scarcity further and recoup profits from their low yield. For some farmers, it may be better to break even or better in a year through subsidies from the government than struggle to bring a harvest to manufacturers who may not be paying much. However, they are charging the consumer heftily. The cost of fertilizer, water, and workers is first felt by the farmer, the manufacturer and the processor, the retail outlets, and finally the consumer. Eventually, all the costs get distributed to all parties, but the small family farm and the consumer absorb the lion's share. Even with the fantastic harvest, many farmers will break even after paying their fertilizer bills this year. Whether it is holding on to what you do harvest, letting the harvest go to waste, leaving fields fallow or scaling back production to control losses in price, or being wiped out because of bitter cold, scorching heat, or parching drought, farmers and ranchers will be making some tough decisions and scaling back expectations even further in the coming year. Global responses. Countries worldwide are facing the same crop crisis, and their responses are notably different. China's major fertilizer manufacturer suspended exports amidst tight supplies back in July. China is the world's top exporter of phosphate and shipped over 3 million tons of diammonium phosphate and 2.4 million tons of urea fertilizer this year before suspending exports. Like everywhere else, fertilizer prices in China have hit records this year amid more robust demand from overseas, lower production domestically, and high energy costs. Canada, one of the leading providers of potash, has 4 potash mines. 2 of them are flooded right now, so while there is a snarled supply of fertilizer from overseas, there's also a high production of potash in North America. The UK and Europe seem to be pulling their hair out, trying to find a solution to fertilizer plant closures and the 300% spike in energy. Natural gas is needed to make ammonia, and ammonia is necessary for the process of almost every nitrogen fertilizer. Several plants have closed, facing the prospect of another brutal winter and natural gas too expensive to be utilized in the production of fertilizers. Europe has scrambled to secure an ample natural gas supply, even turning to Russia to fill its tanks. The United States has an abundance of natural gas. Natural gas exports accounted for 23% of total U.S. energy exports last year. But there is a shortage of supply in some areas of the U.S. as producers seek higher profits by exporting to Europe. The global response to the energy crisis and the energy connection between the cost of natural gas and fertilizer production is an every country for itself approach right now. That leads every manufacturer and mining operation to sell to its highest bidders. For first world countries with deep pockets, this can be absorbed. Fertilizer will be scarce, harvests lower, shortages real, some shelves emptied, and some manufacturing scaled back. For third world countries, famine is a real possibility, especially if any weather-related disasters compound the problems. Losses from catastrophes in crop and livestock production, declines after disasters, can trigger sudden changes in agricultural trade flows. Countries exempt to compensate for the domestic loss by increasing import expenditures and reducing export revenues. We're seeing that right now. What you can do. The prospects for next year are, well, gloomy. The dark clouds are clearly on the horizon and heading our direction, but you still have time to prepare personally. Hopefully, that is why you're here. There are still several things you can do now. First and foremost is to raise your food inventory now. Once the forecasts for lower harvest yields come in next year, and the food prices this holiday season are felt and processed by the average consumer, it may be too late. You have to bring up your reserves now. That 25 pounds of flour may seem a lot to go through and store away from critters, but you'd be wise to invest while you still can at $25 to $40. It may double within a few months. Bread may double in price shortly, so you'd be well served to learn to bake your own. You will save buckets of money, probably be healthier by eating more unadulterated nutrients, and inflation will have less impact on you. You may be able to start a food swapping program amongst a few sources, maybe even create a neighborhood network of gardeners. Learn to forage from abundant natural sources. There are ways to cultivate food sources outside of the maze of the grocery store aisles. Increase your on-hand inventory of shelf-stable foods. Buy 2 cans instead of 1. Buy in bulk, cook at home, and seek local stores for your food. You can stock up on canned foods, dehydrated and processed vegetables, or even grow your own. If you don't have some type of outdoor container or even a windowsill garden, you are susceptible to poor nutrition and running out of food if things turn truly bad. I've discussed apartment gardens, plants you can grow in almost any soil like the sunchoke, and there will be a video coming out shortly exclusively on even microgreen gardens. Watch for it by subscribing to this channel. Whatever you do, you have to start producing even a little of your own food. Then you need not to let any of it go to waste through dehydrating, freeze-drying, canning, pickling, or some other means. These may seem like small things, but even mixing a few of them into your daily life will stave off inflationary woes and keep food on your table. So the facts are indisputable. A combination of rising energy costs has led to a rise in fertilizer prices. Production of fertilizer has been reduced because of costs, weather, and countries lowering exports. The results are high costs for farmers and consumers that will further exacerbate inflation and result in scarcity on your food shelves. Reduced availability of fertilizers will lead to smaller harvests and may even create a food crisis in some countries. Panic buying setting in and depleting available inventories is not out of the realm of possibility, so expect more shortages through next year. 2022's harvest will be smaller, prices will rise, and the possibility of scarcity and depletion will become a reality for many. Fortunately for you, adopting prepping principles will keep you in food and lessen the impact on your wallet. For whatever reason, many will still not see the signs and be shocked when shortages materialize. What are you seeing? Do you realize any price increases or food shortages already? Are you growing anything or locally sourcing anything as an alternative? Let us know in the comments below. What woke you up to begin to prepare? What's your prepping plan? I try to read many of the comments and respond to them when I can. That's typically within the first hour of releasing a video. I can notify you when other videos become available if you take the time to subscribe to this channel. As always, stay safe out there.